The day they lowered Ethan's coffin into the ground, the world lost its color. I remember clutching a single white rose so tightly that its thorns drew blood, but I didn't let go. Pain was the only proof that I was still alive. Ethan had been my only child, the axis around which my entire life revolved. When he married Clara 5 years earlier, I had welcomed her like a daughter. I cooked her favorite meals, helped her furnish the new house, even gave them the old family bakery that my husband and I had built from scratch. It was our legacy, and I wanted Ethan to have everything we'd once dreamed of. But standing beside his grave that gray afternoon, I realized how quickly a legacy could turn to dust. Clara stood opposite me, her veil black, her eyes dry. She didn't cry, not once. Instead, she rested a manicured hand on her stomach, as if guarding a secret only she knew. After the service she approached, her perfume slicing through the smell of damp earth. "Margaret," she said in a whisper that felt rehearsed, "you should rest now. Ethan wouldn't want you exhausting yourself." I nodded, too numb to answer. But something in her tone unsettled me. It wasn't grief. It was ownership. That night, the house was so quiet I could hear the tick of the hallway clock like a metronome of sorrow. I stared at Ethan's photo on the mantelpiece, the one where flour dusted his nose, and he laughed, holding a tray of croissants fresh from the oven. I could almost hear him saying, "Mom, everything will be fine." But everything was not fine. Days turned into weeks. Mourners stopped visiting. Clara came by once with a box of documents and a lawyer I didn't know. She looked immaculate, dressed in soft beige, no trace of mourning left. "Mrs. Reynolds," the lawyer began, "Ethan's estate needs to be transferred. The bakery, the house, and related assets were jointly registered under marital law. We'll need your signature for formal release." I blinked. "Release? The bakery was mine before Ethan's marriage," the lawyer smiled politely. "Technically, it became community property when you gifted it to him." Clara crossed her legs and leaned back, her eyes sharp. "It'll stay in the family, don't worry," she said. "I'll take good care of it." Her words hit harder than any slap. In that instant I understood. She wasn't here to share grief. She was here to claim the spoils. That evening I called my old accountant, Mr. Weber. He had been with our family for 25 years, a quiet man with silver hair and a mind like a vault. "Don't sign anything," he warned immediately. "Let me look at the papers first." When he came the next morning, he spread the documents across the kitchen table. His brows furrowed deeper with every page. "Margaret," he said slowly, "this isn't just estate transfer. This is a full ownership handover. Once you sign, you lose every right to the bakery, the house, even Ethan's life insurance policy." I felt dizzy. "But why would she?" "Because she can," he interrupted softly. "Ethan didn't update his will after marriage. By default, she inherits everything." I sank into a chair. "All I want is to keep his memory alive. The bakery is him." Mr. Weber looked at me with sympathy. "Then we'll contest it. Don't worry. We have ways." But Clara wasn't patient. 2 days later, she appeared again, this time with her luggage. "I've decided to move in," she said cheerfully. "It's what Ethan would have wanted, family together." Before I could answer, she was already marching up the stairs, claiming the master bedroom that had been mine and my late husband's. I stood there, powerless, as the echo of her heels filled the hallway like nails tapping on wood. Over the next week, the house stopped feeling like home. She replaced Ethan's photos with her own, painted the living room walls a sterile white, and told me my antique chairs looked too depressing. When I tried to bake one morning, she wrinkled her nose. "Flour everywhere, Margaret. Maybe leave the baking to professionals. Professionals." As if I hadn't needed every loaf that fed this family for 40 years. I endured it quietly until the night she brought her new boyfriend for dinner. Yes, new. Barely 2 months after my son's death, she introduced a man named Greg, all charm and arrogance. "Margaret," she said sweetly, "Greg's been helping me manage the bakery accounts. He's a genius with numbers." I felt bile rise in my throat. Ethan's seat at the table was still empty, and now another man sat there laughing. After dinner, I retreated to my room, shut the door, and cried until the candle burned out. The next morning, I found my belongings neatly stacked in boxes by the porch. A note lay on top. "You've done enough, Margaret. I'll take care of the bakery from here. It's time you rest." I read it twice before it made sense. She was throwing me out of my own home. When I confronted her, she didn't even flinch. "Ethan wanted me to have everything," she said coldly. "Don't make this harder than it needs to be." Her boyfriend stood behind her, arms crossed. "If you don't leave, we'll have to involve the police," he added casually. Something inside me snapped. I packed what little dignity I had left, my husband's watch, Ethan's photo, and one worn-out recipe book, and walked out without looking back. As I reached the gate, I whispered, "I hope one day you see what you've become." That night, I slept in the small apartment above the old bakery downtown, the one I'd kept for deliveries, never imagining I'd live there again. The walls smelled of yeast and memories. I sat on the cold floor holding Ethan's photo. "Son," I murmured, "they took everything, but they can't take you from me." Outside, the city lights blurred through my tears. I didn't know it then, but that exile was the beginning of my freedom. The next morning, the sunlight slanted weakly through the dusty windows of the small bakery flat. I hadn't slept much. My eyes were swollen, my heart felt like it had been wrung dry. The scent of old yeast clung to the air, and the silence was unbearable. The kind of silence that used to mean peace, but now just reminded me that I was alone. I went downstairs, opened the back door, and stepped into the bakery. Everything was just as I'd left it years ago. The flour sacks neatly stacked, the old wooden table scarred from decades of kneading dough, and the framed picture of Ethan in his apron, grinning proudly with his first batch of pastries. I ran my fingers over that photo. "You always said we'd keep baking together," I whispered. "Guess it's just me now." The moment I turned on the lights, something inside me stirred, a small, stubborn spark that refused to die. This bakery was mine before Clara ever entered our lives. Every inch of it carried the weight of my memories, my labor, my family's love. If she thought she could erase me, she was wrong. I spent the entire day cleaning, sweeping the floors, dusting the counters, and rearranging shelves. Every scrape of the broom felt like reclaiming a piece of myself. When I finally sat down, exhausted but oddly alive, I saw the old lockbox hidden beneath a stack of flour sacks. I remembered Ethan putting it there years ago. "For emergencies only, Mom," he'd said with that teasing smile. My hands shook as I opened it. Inside were neatly folded papers, the bakery's original registration, tax records, and a thick, yellowing contract I didn't recognize. The signature on the last page caught my eye, Ethan Reynolds. But below his name was another, written in firm strokes, mine. The heading read, Business Partnership Agreement, 60-40 Ownership Split. I frowned. 60% mine, 40% Ethan's. I had completely forgotten that years ago, before he married Clara, I'd kept the majority ownership to protect the family business. I turned the pages, scanning the clauses, until I reached the one that made my breath catch. Clause 9. In the event of the partner's death, their share shall revert to the primary owner unless otherwise legally overridden by a postmarital will or spousal claim explicitly naming the business. My hands shook as I opened it. Inside were neatly folded papers, the bakery's original registration, tax records, and a thick, yellowing contract I didn't recognize. The signature on the last page caught my eye, Ethan Reynolds. But below his name was another, written in firm strokes, mine. The heading read, Business Partnership Agreement, 60-40 Ownership Split. I frowned. 60% mine, 40% Ethan's. I had completely forgotten that years ago, before he married Clara, I'd kept the majority ownership to protect the family business. I turned the pages, scanning the clauses, until I reached the one that made my breath catch. Clause 9. In the event of the partner's death, their share shall revert to the primary owner unless otherwise legally overridden by a postmarital will or spousal claim explicitly naming the business. My heart pounded. Ethan had never updated this document. He'd never named the bakery in his marital will, which meant, legally, the ownership might still be mine. I grabbed my phone and called Mr. Weber. "You need to come right now," I said, my voice trembling. An hour later, he was sitting across from me, reading the papers with a slow, careful expression. Then he looked up, eyes gleaming. "Margaret, this changes everything. Clara's lawyer ignored this document, maybe intentionally. But this partnership contract predates the marriage. We can challenge her claim." I gripped the edge of the table. "Do I have a chance?" He smiled faintly. "You have more than a chance. You have the truth. But we need to prepare. She'll fight dirty." Dirty, that word echoed in my mind. Clara had already proven she had no limits. That night, I baked again for the first time in months. I rolled out dough with tears streaming down my cheeks, shaping it into the same honey rolls Ethan loved. The smell filled the bakery like a memory come to life. For a few hours, I wasn't a grieving mother or a displaced widow. I was just a baker, doing what I loved. When I opened the front door the next morning, I was surprised to see a small crowd outside. People from the neighborhood, old customers, delivery boys, even Mrs. Peterson, the retired teacher from 2 blocks away. "Margaret," she said warmly, "we saw the lights last night. Are you reopening?" I hesitated, then nodded slowly. "Yes, I think I am." The news spread faster than I could have imagined. By noon, the first batch was gone. People hugged me, told me how much they'd missed my bread, how Ethan's smile had always made their mornings brighter. Their warmth filled the void Clara had left behind, but not everyone was happy. At sunset, a black car stopped outside the bakery. Clara stepped out, heels clicking sharply against the pavement. Her expression was ice cold. "Well," she said, folding her arms, "I see you found a new hobby." "It's not new," I replied calmly. "It's my life," she smirked. "You're trespassing on property that belongs to me." I held up the partnership papers. "Not according to this." Her eyes narrowed, the smile slipping. "Where did you get that?" "It doesn't matter. What matters is that it's legally binding." For a moment, she said nothing. Then she laughed, a brittle, humorless sound. "You really think some old paper will save you? Ethan gave me everything. You're just clinging to ghosts." She turned to leave, but before she got into the car, she looked over her shoulder. "You'll regret this, Margaret. You have no idea who you're dealing with." Her words chilled me, but they also steeled my resolve. I had already lost everything once. I wasn't going to let her take Ethan's dream, too. The next few days were a blur of work and preparation. Mr. Weber filed an injunction to freeze the transfer of ownership until the case could be reviewed. Meanwhile, customers poured in, supporting me. Local papers even ran a small story. "Widowed baker reopens family legacy." Each night, I'd sit by the old window, the same one where Ethan used to wave at me from outside, and whisper, "We're getting it back, son. I promise." But Clara wasn't idle. Late one evening, as I was closing up, I noticed someone standing across the street, a man in a dark coat smoking. He didn't move, didn't speak, just watched. The next day, another man showed up, pretending to be a customer but asking strange questions about my financial backing. I told Mr. Weber, and he sighed. "She's trying to intimidate you. Stay alert and don't open the bakery alone at night." Still, I refused to close. Fear had already taken too much from me. 2 weeks later, a letter arrived. Notice of mandatory hearing, estate and property dispute. Clara Reynolds versus Margaret Reynolds. I took a deep breath, clutching the paper. The battle had begun. That night, as I locked the bakery door, the wind howled through the alley. I glanced up at the faint glow of the moon and whispered, "Ethan, stay with me. I'll need your strength." Somewhere, deep down, I could almost hear him say, "You've got this, Mom." The courthouse smelled of cold marble and tension. I sat quietly in the waiting area, my fingers wrapped around the small silver locket Ethan had given me years ago. Inside it was his photo, his eyes full of laughter. I touched it every few minutes, trying to draw courage from the memory of my son. Mr. Weber leaned toward me and whispered, "Stay calm, Margaret. Let them talk first. The more they reveal, the better for us." Across the room, Clara was the image of control. She wore a sleek black dress, her hair pulled into a flawless bun. Beside her sat Greg, the same man she'd brought into my house as her business advisor. His smirk made my stomach twist. The clerk called our names, and we filed into the courtroom. The judge, a tall woman with kind eyes, looked up from her notes. Mrs. Clara Reynolds, Mrs. Margaret Reynolds, this is a preliminary hearing regarding ownership and inheritance of the Reynolds Bakery. Clara's lawyer stood immediately. Your Honor, my client is the legal widow of Ethan Reynolds. Under state law, all joint marital assets revert to her, Weber rose calmly. Your Honor, before this marriage, my client and her son entered a signed, notarized partnership contract granting Mrs. Margaret Reynolds 60% ownership of the bakery. The contract predates the marriage and has never been superseded by a new will. He handed over the original document. The judge adjusted her glasses and began reading. Clara's confidence faltered. I could see her nails digging into her palm. Mrs. Reynolds, the judge said, looking at her. Did you know about this contract? Clara hesitated. No, Your Honor. Ethan handled all the paperwork. But surely he intended intentions, the judge interrupted softly. Don't override signatures, Clara's lawyer quickly interjected. We request time to verify authenticity. Granted, the judge said. But until verification, ownership remains contested. Neither party is to alter business operations or withdraw funds. When the gavel fell, I exhaled for the first time in hours. It wasn't victory yet, but it was hope. Outside, Clara approached, her eyes blazing. You think this means anything? You're just delaying the inevitable. I'm fighting for what's mine, I replied evenly. Greg snorted. You're fighting ghosts, old woman. I turned to him. Funny. Ghosts have a way of haunting people who deserve it. He glared but said nothing. Clara pulled him away, heels echoing like gunshots down the corridor. Weber placed a reassuring hand on my shoulder. She's nervous. That's good. It means we're hitting the right nerves. Back at the bakery, I found a small brown envelope taped to the front door. My heart skipped. Inside was a single note typed on plain paper. Stop fighting. You'll regret it. There was no signature. For a moment, I stood frozen. Then I tore the note in half and tossed it into the trash. Clara could threaten all she wanted. I wasn't backing down. Business was picking up again. Customers kept coming, drawn by sympathy and the familiar smell of fresh bread. Every loaf I baked felt like a small act of rebellion. People smiled, offered encouragement. We're rooting for you, Margaret, one woman said. Those words mattered more than she knew. That night, as I closed up, Weber called. Margaret, I need you to come by tomorrow. Something's come up. When I arrived at his office the next morning, he had a folder open on his desk. I was going through Ethan's financials. I found irregular transfers, large sums moved from the bakery account to a private one under Clara's name, weeks before Ethan died. I frowned. Are you saying she took money without him knowing? He sighed. It's possible she convinced him to sign authorizations. But it doesn't look like his handwriting on all the forms. A chill ran through me. What does that mean? It means, Weber said, voice grim, we may be dealing with forgery. I sank into the chair. My son was barely in his 30s when he died, healthy, strong, full of plans. His death had been ruled an accident, a car crash on a rainy night. But now, doubt crept in where grief had lived. Weber's eyes softened. I know what you're thinking. Don't jump to conclusions yet, but we'll request full forensic review of those signatures. If she falsified them, she's in serious trouble. For the first time since Ethan's funeral, anger cut through my sadness like a blade. That evening, Clara showed up at the bakery again, all charm and false warmth. Margaret, she began, I've been thinking. We don't have to make this ugly. Sign over your share and I'll give you a monthly allowance. You can retire peacefully. I looked at her, really looked, the expensive clothes, the cold eyes, the way her fingers tapped impatiently against her purse. You're not offering peace, Clara, I said quietly. You're offering hush money. Her smile faltered. You're delusional. Maybe, I said. But I'm the kind of delusional that bakes bread people actually love. Something you'll never understand. She sneered and turned to leave. Enjoy your little victory lap. It won't last. The door slammed, the bell above it jingling violently. I took a deep breath, staring at the reflection of her taillights disappearing down the street. That night, I went through Ethan's old belongings stored in the bakery attic. Among his notebooks and recipe books, I found a sealed envelope addressed in his handwriting, for Mom. Only open, if something happens to me. My hands trembled as I tore it open. Inside was a single sheet of paper, Ethan's letter. Mom, if you're reading this, I guess life didn't go the way we planned. I know how stubborn Clara can be, and if she's trying to take what's yours, please don't let her. You deserve the bakery more than anyone. It's your soul. I left instructions with Mr. Weber in case anything happens. Trust him. And please, don't let grief make you stop living. You always told me the secret to good bread is patience. Maybe it's the secret to healing too. I love you. Tears blurred my vision. Ethan had known. He had known. I called Weber immediately. He was silent for a moment when I told him. Then he said, Margaret, bring me that letter first thing tomorrow. This could be crucial. I stayed up all night sitting by the old oven. Ethan's letter pressed to my heart. For the first time in months, I felt him near, not as a memory, but as strength. Morning came with heavy clouds and the scent of rain. I looked out the window at the street, at the small sign above the bakery door. Reynolds Family Bakery. They'll never take you away from me again, I whispered. But as thunder rolled in the distance, a quiet unease settled over me. Something told me Clara wasn't done, and that the next move she made would be far worse than legal threats. The next morning, the rain came down in cold sheets, hammering against the bakery's windows as if the world itself wanted to drown out the storm building inside me. I wrapped Ethan's letter in a plastic sleeve, tucked it carefully into my coat pocket, and drove to Mr. Weber's office through the fog. He was already waiting, coffee steaming beside him, the letter from Ethan open on his desk beneath a small reading lamp. He looked up at me with a tight expression, part astonishment, part concern. Margaret, he said quietly, this letter, it's not just sentimental, it's legal evidence. I frowned. Evidence of what? He pointed to a line near the bottom. I left instructions with Mr. Weber in case anything happens. He leaned back. He was referring to a secondary will, one we drafted together about a year ago, but never filed officially. Ethan wanted to make sure that if anything happened, the bakery and its income would remain under your name, not his wife's. I froze. Why didn't you tell me that before? Weber sighed. Because I thought he'd withdrawn it when he married Clara. I didn't realize he'd hidden a copy. He slid another document toward me, a scanned draft bearing Ethan's unmistakable signature. The ink had faded slightly, but the date was clear, 6 months before his wedding. I'll have this verified, Weber said firmly. If the signature matches, and with this letter as proof of his intent, we can reopen the inheritance claim. That means Clara's rights could be suspended until full investigation. I sat there silently, my hands trembling. For the first time since the funeral, I felt something close to justice stirring in the air. Just then, Weber's assistant stepped into the room, holding a thin file. Sir, you asked me to pull bank transactions from Ethan Reynolds' accounts. There's something odd. She opened the file and spread the papers across the desk. My stomach twisted as I read the figures. A $75,000 withdrawal 2 days before Ethan's accident, authorized by Clara. Where did the money go? I asked, my voice barely audible. The assistant pointed to a line. A joint investment account opened under her and Greg Harmon's names. I stared at it. Greg, the man who had been by her side since the funeral, pretending to be her business advisor. My mind reeled. Clara hadn't just betrayed Ethan emotionally, she'd stolen from him. Weber's jaw tightened. If we can prove the forgery and theft, she'll face criminal charges. I swallowed hard, the truth hitting me in waves. Then we prove it. That night I barely slept. I sat at the kitchen table, the letter in front of me, staring at Ethan's handwriting. Every stroke of ink felt like his voice whispering, "Keep fighting, Mom." The next day I went to the bakery early. The air was thick with the smell of rising dough and rain-soaked pavement. As I kneaded the bread, the bell above the door jingled. I looked up and froze. Clara stood there, soaked from the rain, but still wearing her usual smug smile. "Morning, Margaret," she said sweetly. "Working hard for something that doesn't belong to you?" I wiped my hands on my apron. I could say the same. She walked slowly around the counter, her heels clicking against the floor. "You've caused me a lot of trouble. Lawyers, reporters, nosy neighbors. You could have just taken the money I offered. Money can't buy what's mine. I said coldly. Her eyes darkened. You really think anyone will believe an old woman's story over mine? I have witnesses, lawyers, and every account under Ethan's name. Except one, I said quietly. The bakeries, her smile faltered. What do you mean? I found the contract. The one that gives me 60%. And now I have Ethan's letter confirming his intent. Her face went pale, but she quickly masked it with a laugh. A letter? That's what you're betting on? Please. I leaned closer, lowering my voice. You forged his signatures, didn't you, Clara? You and Greg. You took money from Ethan before he died. For a split second, I saw panic flash in her eyes. Then she turned toward the door. You're delusional, she hissed, pushing it open and storming into the rain. But her reaction told me everything I needed to know. Later that afternoon, Weber called with updates. The forensic report came back. Those withdrawal forms, Ethan didn't sign them. The handwriting's a match for Clara's. I closed my eyes. What happens now? He hesitated. We'll present this at the next hearing, but Margaret... What? There's something else. His tone was grave. Ethan's car, the one from the accident. The mechanic's report I requested came in. The brake fluid line was deliberately cut. The room spun around me. You mean, it wasn't an accident? It looks that way, Weber said softly. We're contacting the police. I gripped the edge of the counter to steady myself. All the air seemed to leave the room. She killed him, I whispered. She killed my son. The next few days were chaos. Detectives questioned me, collected Ethan's letter, the bank statements, and Weber's files. I told them everything, the threats, the forged documents, the men watching the bakery, one of the officers. A kind-eyed man named Dawson promised me, We'll handle this carefully, Mrs. Reynolds, but we'll need you to stay low for a while. Clara's going to realize she's cornered. That night, I double-locked every door and window. I barely ate, barely slept. Every shadow outside felt like a threat. Then, just past midnight, there was a noise, faint but distinct. The back door creaked. I froze. My heart pounded so hard it hurt. I grabbed the rolling pin from the counter, tiptoeing toward the sound. The kitchen was dark except for the dim light from the oven timer. The door eased open. Margaret. A whisper hissed from the dark. It was Clara. Her hair was wet, her mascara streaked. We need to talk, she said, stepping inside. Get out of my house, I snapped, clutching the rolling pin tighter. Please, she said, voice trembling. You don't understand. I didn't mean for him to die. My breath caught. So you did cut his brakes, she shook her head violently. No, Greg did. It was supposed to be a warning, just a way to scare him into signing everything over. But the car! It spun out of control. I felt sick. You were going to scare my son into submission? Her voice broke. He was leaving me, Margaret. He found out about Greg. He said he'd expose us. I panicked. I told Greg to do something, but not that. Not murder. I stared at her, the woman who had destroyed everything good in my life. You don't get to cry, I said quietly. You'll tell the police everything, or I swear. Headlights flashed outside. A car screeched to a stop. Clara's eyes widened. It's Greg. He followed me here. Before I could respond, the front door burst open. Greg stormed in, rage written across his face. You stupid woman, he shouted at Clara. You brought her into this mess. You were supposed to keep quiet. Get out, I yelled, backing away. Greg pulled something from his jacket. A small silver pistol that glinted under the oven light. Both of you need to shut up, he snarled. This ends tonight, Clara screamed. I ducked behind the counter as the gun fired. The sound exploded through the bakery, glass shattering everywhere. The shot rang out like thunder in a storm. My ears buzzed, my hands pressed against the cold tile floor. I could taste the acrid smell of gunpowder in the air. The bakery, my safe place, my home, now echoed with chaos. Clara was screaming, her voice shrill and desperate. Greg, stop! You're insane. Greg's boots thudded against the floorboards. You couldn't just shut your mouth, could you? His voice was filled with venom. I crouched behind the counter, clutching the rolling pin so tightly my knuckles turned white. My heart was hammering so hard that I thought it would burst. I heard the sound of shattered glass crunching under his shoes as he walked closer. Margaret, he snarled. Where are you? His shadow loomed against the wall. I could see the glint of the gun under the flickering light. I swallowed hard, my mind racing. I couldn't outrun him, but maybe I could outthink him. Greg, I said softly, my voice trembling. You don't have to do this. He froze for a moment. You should have stayed out of this, he hissed. You had no idea what Ethan was doing. He was cheating her first. Ethan loved her, I said sharply. But she destroyed him. Greg's jaw clenched. He was going to ruin everything. We just wanted the money. You think she cared about him? It was always business. At that moment, Clara lunged at him from behind. You monster! She screamed, clawing at his arm. The gun went off again, deafening, and Clara crumpled to the ground, clutching her shoulder. No, I shouted. Greg turned toward me, his face twisted with fury. Now look what you made me do. Before I could think, I swung the rolling pin with all my strength. It smashed into his wrist and the gun clattered to the floor. He lunged for it, but I kicked it away and hit him again, this time across the face. He stumbled, swore, and grabbed a metal pan from the counter. The next seconds were chaos. Metal crashing, glass shattering, two people locked in a desperate fight for survival. He shoved me hard against the counter. My head hit the edge, and for a moment the world went white. But then, through the haze, I saw his hand reaching for the gun again. I grabbed the nearest thing, a sack of flour, and hurled it at his face. The bag burst, filling the room with a white cloud. Greg coughed and cursed, momentarily blinded. I didn't think. I ran. I bolted through the kitchen door, out into the rain-soaked alley, my shoes splashing in puddles. My lungs burned, and the cold air cut through me like knives. Behind me, I heard Greg stumbling out, coughing, shouting. You can't hide forever. But then, sirens, red and blue lights flashed through the mist. Greg froze. He turned toward the street, eyes wild. For a second, he looked like a cornered animal. Then he ran, the other way, disappearing into the fog. Police cars screeched to a stop in front of the bakery. Two officers jumped out, weapons drawn. I collapsed to my knees in the alley, gasping for breath. Ma'am, are you hurt? One of them shouted. I shook my head, tears mixing with the rain. Inside! Clara's inside! She's been shot. They rushed in, and I heard shouts. Clear the room! She's alive! Followed by the clatter of stretchers. Officer Dawson appeared moments later, kneeling beside me. Mrs. Reynolds, you're safe now. We've got her and the gun. Ambulance is on the way. I nodded weakly, still trembling. Greg, he ran. He's armed. We'll find him, Dawson said firmly. We already have witnesses. You did the right thing. As the paramedics loaded Clara into the ambulance, she turned her head weakly toward me. Her face was pale, eyes glassy with pain. I didn't mean for this, she whispered. I stared at her, my voice flat. You meant every bit of it. She closed her eyes, and they drove her away into the storm. 2 days later, I sat in a hospital waiting room, bandages wrapped around my forehead. The smell of disinfectant filled the air, and the soft hum of machines played in the background. Officer Dawson entered with Mr. Weber beside him. Both looked tired but relieved. Greg's been caught, Dawson said. He tried to flee across state lines. We have him in custody. He's confessed to everything, the forged documents, the embezzlement, and the brake tampering. I felt a wave of cold wash over me. And Clara? She's stable, Dawson replied. But she's being charged too, conspiracy, fraud, obstruction. She's agreed to testify against Greg in exchange for a lighter sentence. Weber leaned forward. Margaret, the district attorney, reviewed the evidence. They're reopening Ethan's case officially as a homicide investigation. And more importantly, he pulled out a folder and placed it in front of me. The court has reinstated your ownership of the bakery. It's yours again, fully, legally, and permanently. I stared at the papers through blurred vision. After all this, Weber smiled gently. After all this, justice is finally on your side. I couldn't hold back the tears. Not the kind of grief I'd carried for months, but release. The bakery reopened a month later. The sun shone bright that morning, the smell of fresh bread filling the air. The sign above the door gleamed again. Reynolds Family Bakery. People came from all over, customers, neighbors, even the police officers who had saved me that night. They filled the small space with laughter and warmth, erasing the shadows that had once haunted it. Mrs. Peterson hugged me tightly. Ethan would be so proud of you, Margaret. You kept his dream alive, I smiled, wiping a tear. He's still here, you know. In every loaf, in every smell, in every smile. When the last customer left, I locked the door and stood in the middle of the shop. The golden light of dusk spilled across the counter where Ethan and I had once worked side by side. I took out his letter from the drawer, now framed behind the counter. The ink had faded slightly, but the words still shone bright. If you're reading this, it means I couldn't say goodbye. But don't cry, Mom. Keep the bakery alive. Keep smiling. And don't ever let anyone take away what you built. I smiled softly, whispering, I didn't, son. I didn't. Outside, a light breeze carried the scent of sugar and cinnamon down the street. For the first time in years, I felt peace. Ethan's memory wasn't buried under betrayal anymore. It lived on in the warmth of the ovens, in the people who came through the door, and in me, the woman who refused to be erased. I turned off the lights, took one last look at the sign, and whispered into the night. We made it. Ethan. And as I stepped into the cool evening air, I could almost hear his voice on the wind, proud, gentle, full of love. The courthouse was packed again, reporters, townspeople, even a few curious customers from the bakery. The case of State versus Clara Reynolds and Greg Turner had become the talk of the town. Everyone wanted to see how it would end. I sat on the wooden bench near the front, my hands folded in my lap, my heart strangely calm. It had been 3 long months since that night, the night the truth finally came out. Greg had confessed to everything, and Clara was still pretending to be the victim. When the bailiff called my name, I stood, walked up to the witness stand, and placed my hand on the Bible. Do you swear to tell the truth? The whole truth, and nothing but the truth? I do. As I sat, I caught Clara's gaze from across the courtroom. Her once perfect posture was gone, her face pale and drawn. She looked like a woman who had finally realized that all her lies had come home to roost. The prosecutor began gently. Mrs. Reynolds, can you tell the court what happened the night of the attack at your bakery? I took a deep breath. Greg Turner came to my bakery armed with a gun. He was angry because I refused to sign over ownership papers that he and Clara had forged. He shot Clara when she tried to stop him and then attacked me. If not for the police, I might not be here today. There was a murmur in the courtroom. I could feel Clara's eyes burning into me. The prosecutor nodded. And before that night, you discovered evidence that your late son's death might not have been an accident? Yes, I said, steady but firm. Mr. Weber, my attorney, found financial documents showing that Clara and Greg had been transferring large sums of money into hidden accounts before Ethan's death. The car Ethan drove that night had its brake lines tampered with. Greg admitted to doing it. The room fell silent. Clara's lawyer shifted uncomfortably in his seat. The prosecutor continued. Mrs. Reynolds, after all this, what do you want from the court today? I paused. For months I had thought about this moment. The revenge, the justice, the closure. But standing there, looking at Clara, I realized I didn't want revenge anymore. I wanted peace. I just want the truth, I said softly. The truth about what they did to my son. About how greed can destroy a family. About how love, real love, is worth more than any money. I want to make sure no one else goes through what I did. The judge nodded, making notes. Thank you, Mrs. Reynolds. When the defense lawyer stood to cross-examine, Clara looked up, her eyes red. Mrs. Reynolds, he began, isn't it true that you and your daughter-in-law had a difficult relationship even before your son's death? I met his gaze steadily. Yes, because I saw what kind of person she really was. But Ethan loved her, and I respected that, until the day she betrayed him. The lawyer shifted tactics. You've accused her of terrible things? Don't you feel any sympathy for her? She's lost everything. Sympathy? I echoed. For someone who destroyed her husband and tried to ruin his mother's life. No, I feel sorry for the woman she could have been, if greed hadn't consumed her. A ripple of whispers spread across the room. Even the judge's pen paused. The defense attorney sat down quietly. When I stepped off the stand, Weber gave me a nod of quiet pride. You handled that perfectly, he whispered, hours later. After all the witnesses had spoken and the evidence had been reviewed, the judge called everyone back for the verdict. Having considered the testimony, the physical evidence and the confessions, she said firmly, This court finds Gregory Turner guilty of murder in the second degree and conspiracy to defraud. He is hereby sentenced to life in prison without parole. A gasp ran through the courtroom. Then she turned to Clara. Mrs. Clara Reynolds, this court finds you guilty of conspiracy, obstruction of justice, and financial fraud. You are sentenced to 15 years in state prison. Clara's knees buckled. Her lawyer grabbed her arm, but she pulled away, collapsing into her chair. No, please, Your Honor. I didn't mean for Ethan to die. The judge's voice was cold but fair. You meant to take what was not yours, and in doing so, you destroyed lives. The gavel struck, echoing like thunder through the silent room. It was over. As they led Clara away in handcuffs, she turned her head toward me. He was my husband too, Margaret, she said, her voice cracking. I loved him. I shook my head slowly. No, Clara, you loved what he gave you. And with that, she was gone. That night, the bakery lights glowed warm and golden again. The storm was finally behind me. Customers had left cards and flowers on the counter. Notes that said, "Stay strong, we're proud of you. Ethan would smile if he saw you today. Daniel." My neighbor's teenage son, who helped me bake now, locked up the front door. "Mrs. Reynolds," he said shyly, "I think my grandma's right. Your bread really does make people happy." I smiled, handing him a bag of fresh rolls. "Then let's keep making people happy, Daniel." When he left, I sat by the window with a cup of tea. Outside, the moonlight reflected off the bakery sign. For the first time in a long time, I didn't feel alone. The quiet was gentle now, not empty. I looked at Ethan's photo above the counter and whispered, "It's over, sweetheart. You can rest now." The wind outside rustled softly, and for a moment I imagined his voice, that familiar laugh, carried in the breeze. A few weeks later, Weber visited me one last time. He placed a thick envelope on the table. "Final settlement," he said. "Everything in your name. You've won, Margaret, legally, financially, and morally." I smiled faintly. "I never wanted to win, Mr. Weber. I just wanted peace," he nodded. "And now you have it." When he left, I walked to the back of the bakery where Ethan's old recipe book still sat open. I turned to the last page, an unfinished note in his handwriting. "Mom, someday, when life feels heavy, bake something sweet. It's the fastest way to heal a broken heart." I closed the book and smiled through my tears. The next morning, I baked cinnamon rolls, Ethan's favorite, and left one by the window. The sunlight streamed through the glass, touching the golden crust like a blessing. I didn't need revenge or pity or even justice anymore. I had something far more powerful, peace and a kitchen that smelled like love. The days began to blend into one another. Soft mornings scented with butter and cinnamon, afternoons filled with laughter and chatter from the bakery, and quiet evenings when the last rays of sunlight fell across the worn tiles where Ethan once stood. People often asked me, "Mrs. Reynolds, how did you survive all that pain?" And I would smile and answer, "Because I finally remembered who I am." It wasn't pride. It was peace, the kind that comes only after you've been broken and rebuilt. The bakery had become more than a business again. It was therapy, community, and memory all kneaded into one. The locals who had watched the scandal unfold now brought their families every weekend. They called it the bakery that beat the darkness. One morning, a woman about my age entered quietly. Her face was lined with exhaustion, her hands trembling. I recognized that look, the same one I had seen in my own reflection months ago. "Mrs. Reynolds?" she asked softly. "May I talk to you?" I led her to the small table by the window. She told me her name was Anna, and her son had fallen in with the wrong people, taken advantage of, lied to, and now she was left picking up the pieces. "I saw your story in the newspaper," she said. "You lost your son too, but somehow you're still standing. How?" I looked around at the bakery, the warm glow of the ovens, the smell of caramel and coffee, the laughter of Daniel mixing dough in the back. "Because I realized I couldn't bring Ethan back," I said quietly. "But I could honor him by living. Every loaf I bake, every smile I share, it's my way of saying I survived." Anna nodded, tears in her eyes. "Maybe that's what I need to do too. Before she left, I handed her a small paper bag. Inside was a loaf of our healing bread, honey, oats, and cinnamon. Ethan's favorite mix. When life tastes bitter, I said, bake something sweet. She smiled, and for a moment, I saw hope return to her tired face. Weeks turned into months. The scandal slowly faded from town gossip, replaced by stories of recovery, kindness, and new beginnings. But for me, the past still whispered sometimes, in quiet moments when the oven hummed and the air was still. One evening, just before closing, Officer Dawson walked in, his uniform dusted with rain. "Evening, Mrs. Reynolds," he greeted. "Thought you'd like to know, Greg Turner's appeal was denied. He'll serve his full sentence." I paused, my hands still on the counter. "And Clara?" He hesitated. "Transferred to a rehabilitation program in state prison. They say she's changed." I exhaled slowly. "People can change, but they can't undo what they've done." He nodded. "You've been strong through all this." I smiled faintly. "I stopped being strong. I just started being honest." When he left, I locked the door and leaned against the glass, watching the rain streak down the window. Forgiveness wasn't easy, but holding on to hate was heavier. So I whispered to the empty room, "I forgive you both, but I'll never forget." That winter, the town held its annual harvest festival, and the mayor invited me to set up a booth. I hesitated at first, but Daniel insisted. "Mom, you need to show people that the bakery's not just back, it's stronger than ever." We worked for days, baking hundreds of loaves, pies, and pastries. The morning of the festival, the air was crisp, filled with music and laughter. Children ran between stalls, couples shared hot cider, and the scent of roasted corn filled the air. Our booth was the busiest. People lined up for Ethan's cinnamon swirls and Margaret's honey bread. "Your story gave me courage," one woman said as I handed her a loaf. "I left my cheating husband last month. You made me believe I could start over." I smiled, my heart swelling. Then we've both baked something new from the ashes. Later that afternoon, the mayor approached me with a certificate. "Mrs. Reynolds," he said over the microphone, "this year's Community Resilience Award goes to you for showing us that even the deepest wounds can heal, and for making this town a little sweeter." The crowd clapped, and I blinked back tears as Daniel lifted his phone to record. When the ceremony ended, he hugged me tightly. "You did it, Mom, you really did." "No," I whispered, resting my hand on his cheek. "We did." That night, when the bakery was quiet again, I found myself sitting by the old counter, looking at Ethan's framed letter one more time. "Keep smiling. Mom, don't let them take what you built." His words were no longer a reminder of pain, they were a promise kept. The door creaked open softly, and Daniel entered still wearing his jacket. "Can't sleep?" he asked. I shook my head. "Just remembering." He sat beside me, his voice gentle. "I think he'd be proud, not just of the bakery, of you." I smiled. "He's the reason I'm still standing." Daniel looked around the shop, his eyes thoughtful. "Mom, I've been thinking maybe we could open another branch next spring. Call it Ethan's Corner. What do you think?" For a moment, I couldn't speak. My throat tightened. "You really think we could do that?" He nodded, smiling softly. "I think it's time this bakery keeps growing, just like you did." Tears welled in my eyes. "Then let's do it. For Ethan." Spring came early that year. Flowers bloomed around the bakery entrance, and the smell of new beginnings filled the air. Daniel handled the business side, and I taught young apprentices how to knead dough with patience and heart. Sometimes customers asked for my secret ingredient. I would smile and say, "It's not sugar, it's strength." A few months later, our second branch opened. A modest place by the riverside, with sunlight streaming through wide windows and a small bronze plaque that read, "Ethan's Corner, a taste of love forged through loss." When we cut the ribbon, I felt a breeze brush my face, warm and familiar, as if Ethan was there, smiling. That night, after everyone left, I walked to the riverside behind the bakery. The stars shimmered above, and the gentle sound of water calmed my heart. I closed my eyes and whispered, "It's done, Ethan. We've rebuilt everything." The pain, the loss, it all led here. The wind answered softly, carrying the scent of honey and flower, And for the first time in years, I felt completely whole. As I turned to leave, Daniel's voice called out behind me, "Mom, come inside. The bread's ready." I smiled, walking toward the light of the bakery, the golden glow spilling onto the street. I had walked through fire, through betrayal, through loss. But I had found my way home, not to the house I'd lost, but to the life I'd rebuilt. A few months later, a letter arrived at the bakery. The handwriting was shaky, uneven, but the moment I saw the name on the envelope, my heart skipped. Clara Reynolds. For a long moment, I just stared at it. My hands trembled slightly as I turned it over. I could have thrown it away. I could have burned it. But something inside me, maybe the last bit of closure I still needed, made me open it. The letter was brief, written in faded blue ink. "Margaret, I don't expect forgiveness." I wouldn't forgive me either. I've had a lot of time to think in here. They make us attend classes about remorse, about choices, about facing what we've done. For a long time, I told myself I didn't deserve this. But now I see that I do. Ethan was a good man. I didn't kill him with my hands, but I killed him with my greed. Every night, I hear his voice in my dreams. He tells me to tell you the truth. So here it is. I pushed him that night. We were arguing by the car. I didn't mean for it to happen, but I did. I'm sorry. I know those words mean nothing now, but I wanted you to hear them from me, not from the news, not from the lawyers. Maybe someday you'll bake something sweet and think of me, not as a monster, but as a woman who finally realized what she became. Clara. When I finished reading, I sat very still. The clock ticked softly in the background, the smell of fresh bread filling the air. For the first time in years, I didn't cry. I didn't scream. I just let the silence sit beside me, heavy but cleansing. I folded the letter and placed it under Ethan's photo behind the counter. "Now I know," I whispered, "and now I can let you go." That evening, Daniel came in carrying a stack of flyers. "Mom," he said, "we're officially hosting the grand reopening next week. The mayor's coming, the news station too. You ready to be famous again?" I laughed softly. "I've had enough headlines to last a lifetime." "Not this kind," he said, grinning. "This time, it's for something good." The next few days passed in a blur of preparation. The new branch, Ethan's Corner, gleamed with polished counters and fresh paint. The air was alive with the scent of hope, cinnamon, butter, and redemption. When the big day arrived, people filled the street outside. Cameras flashed, children ran around holding free pastries, and music played softly from a nearby speaker. Daniel took the microphone. "Everyone," he began, "thank you for coming. This bakery isn't just a business. It's proof that no matter what life takes from you, family, peace, or hope, you can rebuild it. My mother showed me that." The crowd cheered, and I felt my eyes well with tears. He turned to me, smiling. "Mom, would you like to say something?" I stepped forward, the sun warm on my face. "This bakery," I said softly, "was born from loss, but it survived because of love. My son Ethan taught me that love doesn't die with people. It lives in what we do for others. So today, I'm not celebrating what I lost. I'm celebrating what I found again. Strength." The crowd applauded. Someone shouted, "We love you, Mrs. Reynolds." And I couldn't help but laugh. After the ribbon was cut, customers flooded in. Children pressed their faces to the glass display, pointing at cupcakes. Couples sat near the window, sharing laughter, and for a moment, I stood still in the center of it all, just watching. This was the life I had fought for. That night, after the last customer left and the street outside was quiet, I took off my apron and sat near the counter. Daniel was sweeping, humming softly. "Mom," he said suddenly, "you did it. You turned all that pain into something beautiful." I smiled, looking around. "I didn't do it alone. I had you. I had faith. And maybe I had a little help from above." He leaned against the counter. "You ever think Ethan sees all this?" I looked toward the window where moonlight spilled across the floor. "I don't think he just sees it, Daniel. I think he's proud." We sat in silence for a while, not the heavy, haunted silence of before, but a peaceful one. When Daniel finally left, I locked up and walked out into the cool night air. The sign above the bakery glowed softly. "Ethan's Corner," I whispered. "Good night, my boy." The wind brushed my cheek like a gentle kiss. Months later, I received another letter. This one from the Department of Corrections. Clara Reynolds had died of illness. No family had claimed her body. I folded the letter and stared at it for a long time. Then I went to the garden behind the bakery. It was early morning, the dew still fresh on the grass. I knelt by a small rose bush Ethan had planted when he was 10. Back when his biggest dream was to own a bakery with his mom. I buried the letter beneath it. "Rest now," I whispered. "All of you." Years passed, the bakery grew. Daniel got married to a sweet woman named Emily, who shared his gentle heart. They had a daughter, little Lila, who inherited Ethan's laughter. Every Sunday, she ran into the bakery shouting, "Grandma, can I help?" And I always said yes. She stood on a stool beside me, her tiny hands covered in flour. "What are we making today, Grandma?" "Something sweet," I would say. Always something sweet. On the bakery's 10th anniversary, the town gathered again. They unveiled a bronze plaque by the door, in memory of Ethan Reynolds, the son who inspired strength and the mother who turned pain into love. As I looked at it, Lila tugged on my sleeve. "Grandma, are you crying?" I laughed through the tears. "No, sweetheart. I'm just remembering." She looked up at me, serious and curious. "Remembering what?" "That even when life breaks your heart," I said softly, "you can still make something beautiful out of the pieces." Lila smiled. "Like cookies?" I chuckled. "Exactly like cookies." Later that evening, when the lights were off and the street was quiet, I sat by the window again. The stars shimmered above the bakery, and I thought of Ethan, of the boy who once told me, "Mom, one day we'll bake for the whole world." Maybe we had. Maybe in our own small way we had baked hope. I lifted my cup of tea toward the stars. "We did it, Ethan," the wind answered softly, carrying the faint scent of sugar and cinnamon. And for the first time in my long, complicated life, I knew the past no longer hurt. It had become part of the recipe. The years continued to roll forward, quiet but steady, like waves brushing over the sand. Life wasn't perfect, nothing ever is, but peace had finally found its place in the corners of my days. Every morning, I still woke up before dawn, my hands instinctively reaching for flour and sugar, the smell of baking filling my lungs before the sun had even climbed over the rooftops. There was comfort in the routine, the kind that no betrayal or heartbreak could take away. Daniel and Emily lived just a few streets away now, and little Lila had turned 5. She was sunshine in human form, her laughter echoing through the bakery every weekend as she danced around the counters in her tiny apron. Sometimes, when I watched her run through the shop with flour smudged on her cheeks, I saw Ethan again, his same spark, his same innocent joy. But some mornings, when the light was soft and quiet, I'd find myself standing near the old rose bush out back, the one with the letter buried beneath. I'd whisper to it sometimes, not out of grief anymore, but out of gratitude, because even though my heart had been broken, it had learned how to heal. One Saturday, while cleaning one of the upper shelves in the bakery, I found an old recipe book I hadn't opened in years. Its pages were yellowed, the corners bent, and in Ethan's messy teenage handwriting across one page was written, "Mom's secret flan, don't ever change it." I laughed softly, running my fingers over the words. He used to sit on the counter while I cooked, insisting he could make it better by adding extra vanilla or a pinch of salt. He was always so sure of himself, so full of ideas. I decided to make that flan again that day, exactly as he had written it. No shortcuts, no replacements. As it baked, the smell filled the air, wrapping around me like a memory. When Daniel came by that evening, he stopped in the doorway, smiling. "Smells like old times," he said. "It does," I replied. "I found Ethan's handwriting today." He walked over and hugged me. "He's still here, Mom, just in a different way." We stood there in the kitchen, the golden sunset streaming through the window, the two of us quiet but connected. For the first time, the memories didn't hurt. They just felt like love, pure and undisturbed. One winter morning, Emily called me. "Mom, Lila has a school project. They're supposed to bring something that represents their family. She wants to take one of your recipes." I smiled through the phone. "Then she's representing us perfectly." That Friday, Lila proudly carried a handwritten copy of the flan recipe to school. When she returned home, she told me that her teacher cried after reading the story behind it. "Grandma," she said innocently, "Miss Andrews said that love can taste like sugar." I laughed so hard that tears rolled down my cheeks. Out of the mouths of children come the purest truths. As years passed, the bakery became more than just a shop. It turned into a place of stories. People came not just to buy bread, but to talk, to share their pain, their joy, their lives. I became Mrs. R, the lady who always listened, who always had a warm pastry and a kind word ready. One afternoon, a woman about Clara's age came in. Her eyes were red, her voice soft. "I just lost my son," she whispered, "and I don't know how to breathe anymore." I set down the tray I was holding and took her hands. "You don't have to know how," I told her. "You just have to keep moving until breathing becomes easy again." "It will, one day," she nodded, tears streaming down her face. As she left, I gave her a small box of flan. "It helps," I said. Trust me, that night I realized something. Ethan's bakery had become what I had once needed, a place where broken hearts could rest for a while. One rainy evening, Daniel and I sat at the back table sipping tea. The shop was closed, the lights dim. Outside, raindrops slid down the glass like silver threads. "Mom," he said quietly, "I've been thinking about something." I looked up. "Curious. When you're ready," he continued, "I want to expand the bakery. Maybe open one in the next town. But I don't want to call it Ethan's Corner. I want to name it after you, Margaret's Hearth, because this all started with you." My eyes stung and I tried to speak, but words failed me. He smiled and added, "You've spent your whole life taking care of everyone. It's time your name took care of people too." I reached across the table and squeezed his hand. "If you do that," I said softly, "make sure there's always a rose bush behind every shop." He chuckled. "Deal." That night, after Daniel left, I stayed up a little longer, staring out at the wet street. Reflections of the bakery's lights shimmered on the puddles, and I thought about all the versions of me that had lived in that building. The broken one, the angry one, the grieving one, and now the peaceful one. It struck me then, every version had mattered. Every pain had carved space for new joy. Every betrayal had taught me where real love lived. Sometimes you don't get the happy ending you imagined, but you get the peace you never thought possible. And that's enough. On what would have been Ethan's 40th birthday, Daniel arranged a small family dinner. Emily cooked, Lila set the table, and I baked Ethan's flan, just as he liked it. When it came time to eat, Daniel raised his glass. "To Dad," he said, "to Uncle Ethan, and to Grandma, the heart of this family." We all clinked our glasses. I smiled, feeling Ethan in every laugh that echoed through the room. After dinner, Lila came to me with a drawing she'd made, a big house with flowers and people holding hands. "This is us," she said proudly. "And the heart in the middle is you." I couldn't speak. I just pulled her into my arms and held her tight. Later that night, after everyone went home, I stood once more by the rosebush. The stars were bright, the air cool and calm. I knelt down and whispered, "You'd like her. Ethan, she's got your spirit." The wind rustled softly, brushing through the petals, and for just a second, I could have sworn I heard his laughter, faint and warm, carried on the night air. I closed my eyes and smiled. Everything had come full circle. The next morning arrived with that golden kind of light that makes even old bricks glow like honey. I opened the bakery early as always, but today I didn't rush. I moved slowly, savoring every familiar sound. The creak of the front door, the soft thump of the flour bag, the hiss of the first loaf entering the oven. Everything smelled the same as it had when I first opened this place with Ethan all those years ago. But today, something was different inside me. I wasn't baking to fill a void anymore. I was baking because it made me feel alive. At exactly 7, the bell over the door chimed, and a teenage boy walked in, lanky, nervous, holding a folded newspaper. "Mrs. R?" he asked softly. "Yes, dear?" He smiled awkwardly and handed me the paper. "I'm from the Herald. My teacher told me to interview someone who built something that lasted. And everyone in town said that was you." I laughed gently, wiping my hands on my apron. "Something that lasted, huh? Well, I suppose the ovens are still working after all these years. He grinned. No, they meant you, your story. How you lost everything but still kept this place going. I looked down for a moment, heart tightening just slightly. Oh, I didn't lose everything, I said softly. I still had my son. I still had my memories. And most importantly, I still had my hands. As long as they could knead dough, there was hope. He jotted that down quickly, his pen scratching across the page. Can I take your photo? Of course, I said, standing beside the old oven. The camera clicked. Somewhere deep down, I knew this was more than a photo for an article. It was a photograph of survival. By noon, the bakery was filled with people. Old customers, young students, even travelers passing through the small town. Everyone seemed to know Margaret's hearth now. I saw laughter, warmth, and the same spark of life that used to exist in Ethan's eyes when he dreamed of what this place could become. When the crowd died down, Daniel came in carrying a small box. Mom, he said with a smile, the new sign just arrived. Want to help me hang it? I nodded. Together we walked outside. The sky was bright, the street buzzing with quiet chatter. Daniel unwrapped the box and held up the wooden board. The words were carved deep into it, simple yet powerful. Margaret's Hearth, established, 1989. Love is our secret ingredient. I touched the letters with trembling fingers. It's perfect, I whispered. Daniel climbed the small ladder and secured it above the door. When he stepped down, he looked at me and said, You know, Mom, Dad would be proud. And Ethan? His voice faltered, but I finished for him. He'd probably say we're overbaking the flan again, I said, smiling through tears. Daniel laughed, and for a moment, the air felt lighter. That evening after closing, I made one last batch of honey rolls. I shaped them carefully, brushing the tops with melted butter the way Ethan used to like. Then I poured myself a cup of tea and sat by the window as twilight settled in. I thought about the woman I used to be, the one who lived in fear, who let others dictate her worth, who thought love meant giving everything away. That woman had been burned, betrayed, and broken. But she'd also learned love doesn't mean losing yourself. Forgiveness doesn't mean forgetting. And strength isn't born from comfort. It's born from the fire. The old clock above the counter ticked softly, steady as a heartbeat. I looked around the bakery, every shelf lined with jars and memories. I smiled at the thought that long after I was gone, Daniel and Lila would carry it forward. They'd add their own recipes, their own laughter, their own stories. Just as I was about to close the blinds, the bell over the door rang one last time. It startled me. It was already past closing. I turned and saw Mrs. Peterson, my neighbor and oldest friend, standing there with her cane and a familiar mischievous grin. You didn't think I'd let you close without one last chat, did you? She teased. I laughed and poured her tea. Sit, you old gossip. Tell me what scandal I missed this week. We talked for an hour about nothing and everything. The mayor's new dog, the gossip about the church choir, the way the new grocery clerk smiled too much at everyone. It felt good. It felt normal. Before leaving, Mrs. Peterson looked around and said softly, You did it, Margaret. You really did. You turned your pain into something beautiful. Her words stayed with me long after she left. That night, I walked outside one last time before locking up. The moon hung low, painting the street in silver. The new sign gleamed softly above the door. I looked up at it and felt peace settle deep into my bones. Then I walked behind the bakery, where the rosebush still grew. The petals were pale under the moonlight, shimmering like whispers. I knelt down and brushed my hand against the cool earth. I kept my promise, Ethan, I whispered. I kept it all alive. The wind picked up gently, and for a fleeting moment, I thought I heard his voice again. Not words, just warmth. I smiled and stood up, brushing the dirt from my hands. As I walked back to the bakery door, I turned off the sign, leaving only the soft glow from inside. I looked around the quiet street one last time and whispered to the night, Some stories don't end. They just keep baking. I smiled, locked the door, and walked away. Not as a widow, not as a victim, but as a woman who had finally reclaimed her life. Years later, a journalist visited again. By then, Daniel ran Margaret's Hearth with his daughter. Lila. When asked what the bakery meant to their family, he smiled and said, "My mom used to say that bread rises the same way people do, when they're given warmth, patience, and love." And in the photo accompanying that article, behind Daniel and Lila, the sign still read, "Margaret's Hearth. Love is our secret ingredient."